Hello and welcome to Trimming Armour. Today, unfortunately, our normal host, Will Missett, has chlamydia and can't make it to the recording, but...
No, poor Will. He's just ill.
Well, he could have chlamydia. We don't know about that, dude. Like, it is a possibility, so don't rule anything out. But anyway, Will, you will be missed, but luckily for us, we have one of my favorite YouTubers, the Junesong. Now, the Junesong, shall we call you Junesong? Your name's Alan, right?
Yeah, Alan, Junesong, anything's fine.
Alright, perfect. Junesong is, I would like to say an OG, but I would say an OG of the EOC era, because that's when I think he really made a name for himself. He came making excellent combat guides when people didn't really know what was what, and he really dumbed it down for noobs like me, so it was a lot easier. And of course, we have the wonderful Maikeru, aka Maikeru, with us as well.
When I was like, yeah, I'll let Ravlar do the intro. What could go wrong? And then, yeah, I regret it. But thank you, Rav, for the intro. That was lovely. And yeah, Jude, if you want to introduce yourself and stuff, go ahead, my man.
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, my name's Alan. I'm better known by the Junesong, my in-game username. I've been playing RuneScape since early 2003, so like really, really close to the start. I've been around since pretty much the beginning. Kind of a ridiculous amount of playtime, something like over 1,000 cumulative days at this point, I think. I worked nights for a long time, so there were like periods where I could do 40 hours of RuneScape time at work, and then whatever time I still had at home to do it. Most of my gameplay stuff focused around like PVM things and completionism gaming, and then when I finally got the trimmed completionist cape, it was almost a cliche back then, but everybody was like, when you run out of stuff to do, then you start making videos. So I just started doing that, and they were totally trash at first, but I kind of found my little claim to fame with the combat stuff, because when EOC was released, and honestly even in its current state, it's really confusing for new people, and yet it's remarkably simple when you actually understand it and can explain it in kind of a simple way. So that was my big entry into the market, and that lasted for a couple of years until I'd say probably about a year ago I made the decision to really give up RuneScape. And although I do play a bit here and there at work still, I'm still working the night job, I plan to change jobs and kind of give it up for good in the near future.
I got like a little bit of a question. One was not a question, but thank you for the DPS guides and stuff, because I still reference you to this day whenever someone's like, do you have any guides on like combat or something? It's like, I know Junesong has a really detailed one. You can go check him out. So I always like refer people to you because it's still really, really good.
So good, dude.
The second thing is I heard loads and loads of rumors circulating of like why you stopped, and loads of people saying they're 2 cents of why you stopped. People were saying it's because you had so much like bad feedback from like the elitist PVMers and stuff like that. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that or whatever?
I certainly can. That's partly right. I did take kind of a long break. Basically what happened was, on the tail end of me taking up explaining combat as being my kind of niche to fit in terms of the YouTube community, I also wanted to kind of give feedback and say, hey, these things kind of suck about combat. Could we maybe move in this direction toward things like making it simpler and more intuitive for newer players, and just adding more strategy, so you're using your brain a little bit more rather than just the way we have combat now is kind of a fighting the system thing, and I'm sure we'll get into more details about that later. But in particular, the issue was about four-ticking and continuous four-ticking, and I am still of the opinion that both of them were really, really negative for the game, and the decision to keep one was still negative, but there was a huge community of people who, you know, the elitist types, like you said, that argued in that domain from the position of anybody who disagrees with it being a good thing is just a garbage PVMer or whatever. And it actually turned into like some pretty horrible targeted harassment, not just at me, but to quite a few people for, I would say, over a month even. It was just really, really miserable. So I was like, this is not worth it for my mental health. I'm just going to take a little break. And I think that lasted, I don't know, 4 or 6 months or something. And I made a video that was called like the Triumphant Return or something. Oh, I apologize for my dog barking. That must be my wife getting home. And had every intention of coming back and making videos again. And then a second thing happened that kind of made my decision to just give up RuneScape full stop, which obviously meant giving up the videos again as well.
Oh, man.
What was the second thing? If you want to share it, you don't have to, obviously.
Yeah, no, it was kind of a nail in the coffin thing. There were hundreds of things that went into it, but the final thing was the ultimate shelving of the bank rework. It was just so insane, and I'm sure we can get into that later.
No, I understand that. It's the whole... At that time, there was a lot of promises from Jagex. They've got better at it now, but especially in like the 2016, 2017 times, like they promised a lot of things that were just empty. They still have some empty promises now, but like there's a lot less that they kind of say that's coming out until they know it definitely is. So they definitely got better in that regards, but I understand completely on like your decision.
The flip side of that is, like, before they used to promise too much and, like, not deliver, and that used to break our trust, right? And that was terrible. Like, now what they're doing is better, but it's still not good. It's just they're not promising much at all.
Yeah,
just
that's
so, like,
true.
they meet our, like, minimal expectations. So it's just, like, trying to aim low and avoid disappointment. It's better than before, but it's not ideal, is it?
Mm-hmm. And my take on it is not even quite from that perspective either, because that was honestly something I had just kind of become accustomed to at that point. It was kind of the principle behind it. The bank rework is such a fundamental thing that we need. Like, you're talking about a basic functionality of the game. Like, a bank rework is as basic to the game as like a movement speed rework. Like, that's a really, really core part of making sure that your game just functions well. And to sideline that because you have your engine people working on mobile with the hope of like marketing this to housewives or whatever, it just seems so foolish. It's putting the cart before the horse kind of thing. Like, what's the point of making a marketable mobile game if nobody's going to want to play it because the bank doesn't even work well?
That links in very well to what they've said recently with the... I don't know whether either of you keep up with it or whatever, because I know Rav's doing his old school stuff. He still keeps up with some RS3. I don't know whether you keep up too much of it, Junesong.
I've been paying attention, yeah, a bit.
Okay, cool. So the new development diaries they've released, where they're doing remasters and like reworking old content instead of giving us like thousands of hours of new content that can then just cause more bugs and have more dead content. They're looking at more like reworking dead content as well as some new content, obviously. And I feel like that's exactly what we've been saying on this podcast for quite a long time, and making the old content work, like the bank rework, like they're going to be reworking some skills. They've obviously done mining and smithing. They're looking at more 120s and more reworks in the future, etc. That type of stuff is what the game needs. Like, no one wants to do construction and get carpal tunnel and do it that way, right?
Right,
But
exactly.
if they reworked it and you can actually have a use for your house, you can build a house, you can have it cool, and it's actually fun to do, people are going to have like a much more enjoyable time leveling it to 99 or even 120. That's what they need to do. They need to focus on that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
They had expansions, right? And expansions was like Menopause, etc., etc. Just after the first expansion, oh no, expansions aren't working. We're changing our strategy to unfinished business. Unfinished business is still unfinished. There's so much.
Yeah.
There's still so much left to like fix, like auras, dailies, things which they said was such a high priority for them. The bank rework, which like has not come to fruition yet. Now there's new things like we're gonna. I don't know what it is. Is it rework?
Remasters. But I think they kind of come under unfinished business because they said they don't want to call it unfinished business because it's kind of unfinished business, but it kind of isn't at the same time. I think they're doing unfinished business, but with a mix of other things. Refocusing a little bit. So in terms of like combat in RS3, because obviously that's your speciality and that's why you're here and such. You doing combat in RS3, you making loads of videos on it and the things that you want it to improve. What do you think Jagex have done well since the start of EOC and like the things they've changed? And what do you think would improve continuing forward kind of thing?
Okay. Let's see. Things that they've done well. Recently, some of the recent things have actually been moving more in the direction of what I had been sort of campaigning for from the very beginning. So, like the mutated, or I guess now they're called greater abilities from the Elite Dungeons, every one of them has some kind of a synergistic effect that applies to some other ability. And that forces you to think about how you're going to use them. Like, Flurry by itself is kind of trash, but if you can reduce the cooldown of Berserk, that suddenly makes it strategically useful sometimes, but not all the time. And I think that's really, really key, because what combat is ultimately right now, the experience is almost identical every single time you go to any boss. And aside from a select few that have mechanics that force you to pace yourself in specific ways, you really fight all of them as if they were a combat dummy. Your ability rotation is exactly the same. Maybe every once in a while you need to do like a resonance switch or something, but there's very, very little variety in how you approach combat. Each attack style feels pretty much the same. That's slightly better now with the 4 ticking, and magic feels different than melee and range do. But I feel like we need maybe 2 or 3 times as much of that, like right away. So things like the combination of puncture stacks and salt the wound ability, which that particular combination is kind of useless because the duration on puncture is too short. But things that force you to think about, like, okay, what combination of abilities am I going to use? Can I string them together in a specific way that yields like a greater result, rather than just, oh, I use the strongest thing that I have off cooldown and I do them in the same cycle.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. I think a lot of things that have been done recently are very good. So the greater abilities, there's the boots that now help with detonate. Those boots are insane, and detonate is now viable. Then you have other things like the ingenuity of the humans allows you to do crazy stuff in like P5 Telos, where your Seren Godbow is guaranteed to hit while using magic, and boom, you've hit him for like 30k. It's like insane. Same applies with other stuff like the Eldritch Crossbow. Its spec allows you to change up the way you play and do things that you don't normally do, because you have to have Soul Spit, and Soul Spit doesn't heal you. Now you're dealing extra damage, and those are the type of stuff that encourage that lean forwards gameplay in combat. And I feel like that's exactly what you used to try and like ask, and then you got loads of like hate about it and stuff, and it really confused me, because I always felt like that's every time I see a new thing, it's like, well, that's pretty much what you were saying back in the day,
I always was confused by the backlash too, and frankly, like, I tried to have conversations with the people even when they were being negative, and almost everybody seemed to agree that on the points that I was like taking against 4-ticking and continuous 4-ticking, yeah, they were shitty. But people would say, like, we want more effort to be more DPS, and everybody agrees with that as far as I can tell. But these people just didn't believe that Jagex was capable of putting some other method that was better of achieving that goal, rather than juggling an item switch every 2.4 seconds.
Yeah, so I think the issue with the 4-ticking and the continuous 4-ticking is there's just so much manual input in one go, and like I think everyone is agreed, like, make PVM more challenging, so like, if you can do something more skillful, then you do more DPS. But like I think June's core argument was like make the mechanics themselves like more dynamic, where you have to think about it and things like that, as opposed to just mashing your keyboard like 15 times a second.
Yeah.
Which like like the people who discovered 4-ticking and like continuous 4-ticking, I understand why they were a bit standoffish. Oh, we've discovered this awesome new thing and only like a few people can do it. That makes us feel like we're really, really, really good at the game. Whereas like they just didn't want the game to change because they were good at it the way it was. They didn't want it to evolve.
That was certainly part of it.
But yeah, I like the recent updates as well. I think it's good that weapon diversity didn't pass in its current form. Like the way it would have gone out would have been terrible. But I do like the idea of some diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way they went about it was like completely revamping everything. Whereas just some like minor changes to every little type of weapon or something could have made more sense.
Yeah, the only issue was everyone's just going to use the weapons that still give the most DPS. So it's
Right.
like, oh, this weapon does this cool thing. It's like, yeah, but this one gives me, 3% more DPS. I don't care about that little tiny thing that's going to be so niche that maybe I'll bring a switch to that one place it's worth it. Yeah. Everywhere else, I'm just going to use these things that are going to give me the most deeps. It's like, it was weird. It was hard.
One thing, June, I think you were against was you didn't like Switchscape too much. I think.
Oh no, I hate it.
You pointed out that like we'd gone to the capacity where we had like 12 switches in an inventory, and that was a bit too much.
Oof, it's more.
And
now.
weapon diversity, it's more than that. And weapon diversity would have furthered that. So I think that's good. That a good reason why it is. But I'm not sure how to balance that personally. What do you think about that?
As far as the weapon diversity thing, the biggest objection I had to it was I wasn't sure what we were trying to accomplish, because kind of in the same vein as what I was just saying, if the goal is to have a diversity in experience in combat, having each weapon have a unique effect doesn't really do that unless the effect is something specific like, what was it, throwing darts were going to be a 2-tick global cooldown? I think that's what it was. So that would be pretty significant. Like when you're ranging with a 2-tick global cooldown, suddenly your ability rotation is entirely different. The ability cooldowns aren't going to line up the same way, so your rotation is going to totally differ. And the actual feel of playing that is going to be different. But if it's just a simple like, oh, this is 5% more accurate and this is 10% more damage on magic using enemies, your gameplay is exactly the same. You just have a different preset now. And I don't see what that adds to the game, really.
Gotcha. I understand your mindset now. I completely get it, yeah. That's something which is hard to put into words, but you managed to do it just then. So yeah, let's hold on to that and send that sentence to Jagex, because like it's hard for us to describe that. But if they have it in words, they may be able to understand it a bit more.
Synergistic gameplay, I'm guessing, is probably going to be the main focus of core PVM that is fun at the same time. So like greater abilities that you mentioned, like barge, then changes your whole rotation because you need to make sure you barge, and you like Zerk before you barge, you get your adrenaline pot, and then you can get that threshold in a Zerk as a bleed, then you can get another threshold out with that one ticking at the same time, and then if you have mutated flurry, it can even be used as a bleed that also has the mutated effect of flurry. Like it can be really synergistic in that way, and I think that's where they need to like keep moving towards, keep doing those type of stuff that really act well together and can increase DPS in a way that is hard yet engaging.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, another good example is like Phase 5 Telos. You have this really unique string of abilities that all work synergistically well together, and they're perfect for that situation, and it's so much fun to execute, and it's really difficult because the timing is really precise. It's just unfortunate that things like Natural Instinct and Tsunami don't really actually apply well to other places. They're so much fun to use.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, like for example, you can use Onslaught many places. Like it would make more sense. Like there are so many other ultimate abilities like Unload and stuff, which have like these cool animations, and they would be cool to use them other places, but they're just underutilized because it's not the best thing to do in that scenario.
Right. I don't think I've ever used Unload.
It's so much fun, dude. It's kind of like,
I don't even know if I know the animation, man.
Try it on a combat dummy, bro. You'll see.
It's fun, yeah.
Because there's not that many abilities that are never used, but that's definitely one of them. Because like I know Deadshot isn't used that much, but at least with chins, Deadshot is good.
Yeah.
Like at Rots and stuff, if you have 100% adrenaline, you're kiting them, boom, Deadshot. All of the Rots brothers, if it's all melee or something, that's sick damage. Like it's great.
Yeah.
But Unload, I've just like never used. Great to unload when?
That brings up an interesting thing. One of the many things that was suggested as a way of adding more diversity into combat experience was to take all of the ultimate abilities that nobody uses, because frankly, it's Berserk, Sunshine, and Death Swiftness. Like, that's it. 99% of the time. So why not take all of the other things and say instead of 100% adrenaline drain, they cost 30%, or adjust it to the specific power of each of those abilities. So they're not thresholds, but they're like maybe
like a weapon special attack.
Yeah, like a variation of a special attack. And suddenly you have different amounts of adrenaline drain, which cause huge changes in the way that you would formulate rotations. because they each have unique effects also, that will change the way that you use them at different places. And just like you would almost double the available number of abilities to use if they became viable. Like there's a lot of abilities that never get used for any reason.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. I really like it. So one thing which I've noticed is that like there's so much power creep. There's power creep, power creep, but there's nothing harder to use it on. You know, I'm all for power creep coming into the game. Like, say, for example, we get a really, like, next-level new boss come in, and it drops, like, something really, really awesome, which increases our DPS, right? And that, as a result, makes earlier bosses become easier. That's just a natural progression. But what, like, at the moment, they're just giving us power creep, power creep, power creep, and all the bosses are becoming, like, consistently easier. The times are becoming lower.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to use it on. Like, that's something which I'm not a fan of. I feel like power creep is okay if we earn it, but not the way it is currently.
You're absolutely right. No, yeah, I mean, what was it? Just this morning, Brian, Evil Lucario, did a 4,000% Telos kill with no armor and no food.
He skipped the so much power in P4 completely. I watched it, and I was like, where's the so much power? I just didn't see one because he stun locked it with no armor, nothing, and it's just like the minion lore in the middle with the entangles. Yeah. Oh, man, Lucario's sick. He
is insane. He is absolutely is terrific, but you also have to think this was a boss that was designed to never even be able to be killed at that level, and then to do it and be like, yeah, no food, no armor, I was blindfolded, I was asleep, whatever. That's a sign of really, really serious power creep problems, and that, like you were just saying, can ruin old bosses. One of my favorite bosses of all time was Rise of the Six because of the diversity of experience that's inherent with taking basically 6 individual bosses and throwing them in a random assortment. Their special attack rotation is different every time. The way they overlap with each other is different every time. So on release, it was chaotic, it was dangerous, and it was exciting. And now, because of power creep, it's death dot and chins for 8 seconds and it's over.
Yeah, dude. Rots is my favorite boss as well. And like newbie Rots, like back in like 2016, like when shit was fun and like, you know, you had like an order to kill brothers, but you didn't have like, and everything could go wrong at any time. That was some of the most fun I've ever had in this game. But like Rots in 2019 is ridiculous because not only like they've confirmed like Undead Slayer works there, so that's a +7% damage increase, and then on top of that you have the Undead Sigil that works there as well, and then you have the Maniacal buff, which is another like 25% DPS on it. So like there's literally been in the space of like 3 or 4 years a 50% DPS buff to so many bosses without a new boss coming into game.
I nearly died at Rots yesterday though.
On your hardcore.
It can still happen.
Yeah, I went through the tunnel and I surged and a rock fell on me and I got stuck underneath the rock and I had to lobby. And while getting exploded at, that was horrible, man. I nearly lost my hardcore.
That's not your fault. That's a problem with Rots, dude. That's a glitch. Like that happens quite often.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't have got stuck under the rock technically, but I surged as it fell. So then I couldn't do anything and I panicked and I pooped a little, but I survived, so that's the main thing.
Yeah. Congrats. Good job.
It is a fun boss though, I give you that. It is enjoyable because, you know, anything can happen like you said, but the power creep definitely takes away from some of that. But a lot of people that I know that are starting up bossing and stuff, and me especially, like 2 years ago I think I tried Rots, there was still easier ways to kill it than what we did. But we just went in blind, had a good time. And I remember just like my teammate dying and then me getting pummeled to death by Torag.
Torag,
yeah, just pinning me down, just screaming, like, can't get out. That's the type of stuff with bosses that are fun. And I think now that they've had the comp cape rework and the whole thing that went on with that, they took away Reaper. So essentially, people aren't going to whine if bosses are maybe even harder than what Solak is, and you know you can have more bosses like Telos with really high enraged stuff, because no one really cares now that they're not like going for comp. Only the hardcore PVMers will do that hardcore boss. So I think that might open up the doorway of being like, hey, you want harder bosses, we'll give you this really hard boss. That's like what Telos was when it was first released kind of thing, because they can do that now with no backlash as such.
I'm skeptical about whether or not they've actually been able to avoid backlash by doing that, but we'll see the next time. Are they planning on releasing some super difficult boss? Because I haven't heard about anything being in development. Just a hypothetical. We could do this now.
There was one that was scaling. It was the one that spoke about like 2 years ago. You have to fight him from the inside out. I forgot what his name was, but he's one of like the gods.
I think it was the ambassador. Was it the ambassador?
No. It was the person who's in charge of the ambassador or something. What's his name? I don't know his name, and I apologize. But you have to fight him from the inside out.
I think I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, and there was like a normal mode, there was a hard mode, then there was like a hardcore mode or whatever, which was like, apparently they were going to make it so if anyone in playtesting beat that mode, they're making it harder.
Yeah.
And that would be good because you wouldn't get really like the backlash of someone needing an achievement because they'll just go do the easy mode, which I think they rated about QBD style. Then the hard mode was like Telos style, and then the insane mode or whatever it was, hardcore mode, was like harder than anything that's been out before.
Interesting. So for me, like, I feel the recent bosses that we've had have just been elite dungeons, and while I think that they serve as a niche, I don't think that they are bosses. They're like pretty much raids. Like, they're just like a raid where you do with a bunch of friends if you want to, and like the ambassador's design is pretty cool and fun, but it's just not a boss, you know. It's like it's a wave of something you do quickly, get over with, and do it again, and it's like rinse and repeat. It's not like something where you can really challenge yourself like you can with Telos. So like I really want to see that in 2019, 2020. Like, I think like Solak was a long time ago now. I don't know, it was in 2017, so realistically it will be 20.
Was it really that long ago?
I think it might have been the start of 2018, maybe.
I'm not sure. I think it was summer 2017. I could be wrong, but whenever it is, like, it's going to be like realistically we're going to get a boss in 2020. So it's going to be like 2.5 years, and that's a long time since we've not had something which we can test our new toys and abilities on, you know? Like, that's something that we want to do.
Yeah. The boss was called Hostilius. I just searched it up.
That's what it was, yes.
And it's ModPie was doing it in his tap time, and they said that they were maybe continuing it again soon, and then like working on it and stuff. I remember them talking about it in one of the Q&As somewhere, or behind the scenes. I can't remember when it was. But if they do make something like Hostilius, I feel like that's the perfect boss. Because one, it's a solo boss. We haven't had a solo boss in a little bit since Telos, I guess. And then, it has different difficulty modes, and people like an enrage mechanic or difficulty modes, and then it appeals to everyone. And I don't think they can really get that much backlash if it literally, has the modes that fit for like every player.
Yeah, I agree. I'm surprised they haven't done that with more things. I mean, the Elite Dungeons have the story mode. That's a brilliant solution to the issue of the entire comp rework. Could have been avoided if they had just put in like easy mode bosses or whatever.
I agree. And like, I think ModPie is solely working on mobile. I don't know if that's correct, but like,
he's not working on his own, but he's working on the stuff with Mod Ashes, I believe, when it comes to like the whole buff bar, the interface, stuff like that. I know ModPie was working on that for a while, and the lesser abilities, things like that.
That just comes back to what June was saying earlier, right? Like, so much resources have gone into mobile. Like, we could have had this cool boss in this time, but instead we have a Android mobile beta, and the iPhone one is probably never gonna I don't know when the iPhone one's gonna come out, and it's not even fully released yet. So yeah, this game has really suffered because of mobile, and like anyone who says otherwise is just kidding themselves, because we have suffered.
Of course.
Like, it may be for the greater good. Like, I personally don't think so, but like, we have definitely taken a hit over these past 2 years.
Even not looking at it from like we're missing out on content because these developers are busy working on mobile. Some of the changes that have been designed to more optimize the game for mobile have been negative to desktop. Like, the buff bar issues that we're having literally right now are from this. So it seems like as they're devoting more attention to mobile, the desktop gameplay is getting worse, and they seem not super concerned about that, like a little bit, but not to the degree that you would think, which makes me question where the priorities are.
Understood. Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, like, if if that like kind of experimentation allows them to have like a good launch for mobile, I'm personally fine with it as long as it doesn't fuck up everything every week. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, yeah.
But at the moment, every week there's an issue of some sort, and it's becoming a meme.
Have you seen the new interface on mobile?
No, I haven't done mobile at all.
Rav?
It does look good. I think it looks
like
good.
So they've definitely done good with the interface and stuff. I do agree with you guys that it's taken up a lot of time, and we've mentioned it in previous podcasts where it's like, is it worth the time? No one really knows until it comes out. Probably not, but it's still going to be a nice thing when it is there and it's going to be accessible. But the interface that they've made and some of the changes, like the lesser abilities and stuff that were like designed for mobile and for new players, some of the stuff has come out really well. Even the Burfup, like decluttering or whatever it was called, that's pretty helpful because there's like, when a new player comes in now, there's a new thing that you can like follow, and it kind of teaches you the ropes and teaches you the free-to-play skills and even some of the member skills up to like a level 5 type of thing. And I feel like that is very helpful, and that's come from them doing mobile.
Yeah, I think in principle, mobile could be one of the best things to ever happen at the game if it brings in a big amount of new players, because it's no secret that we have an issue right now where very, very few new players are starting the game. Pretty much every new account is somebody making an Iron Man or something like that.
They've said, though, like that their strategy is not attracting new players. Like, all the JMods admit this. So I think mobile may get some new players, as in people returning to the game, and I think it may keep people staying on the game.
Yeah.
I don't think until the early game is completely revamped, it will bring in new players.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is the problem I see is any new player that's like, oh, cool, I don't know what this mobile app is, like, I'll give it a shot, and makes a RuneScape account and gets dropped in Berthorpe or Tavali, like, half an hour later, they're going to be like, I don't know what the heck is going on with any of this. Like, I don't have the time for it.
I think that's the difference. A lot of people say like, oh, back, 15 years ago when I started this game, no one held my hand. It's like, yeah, but they're competing against all of these huge games now that really, really help with just being able to pick up, play them, you understand it, you get help. Once you've learned it, they let you go and stuff. RuneScape is still stuck that 15 years ago where you're thrown in the deep end straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah, new gamers, they don't really look for, being thrown in with no explanation nowadays, as bad as that sounds. Everyone's used to that whole, hey, this is how you do this, and this is how you do this, and maybe you might want to do this, and then it's like, oh, and you can also try this, good luck. Instead of that, it's just like, RuneScape's like, oh, this is RuneScape, you can kill things, and there's a couple skills, and good luck. And you're like, oh, okay, great, yeah.
So I think like a good point you make, Mike, is like, I think that's a different generation. Like, people need to realize that. Like, the generational differences are so huge between this new, like, I like to call them the Snapchat generation, where, like, they literally rely on feedback constantly. Like, we, as a generation, the millennial generation, our generation, relied on feedback quite a lot. But this new generation is to a whole new level. So it's a completely new audience that games need to cater to. So they definitely need to hold the hand of these like little kids who want to come and play this game, because otherwise they're going to get lost and they're going to get demotivated, and they're going to find something which does hold their hand.
Yeah, and let's be fair, it's not entirely on the consumer's shoulders that they're too entitled to put in the time and effort. A lot about the early game, especially things like combat, like, the system is built in such a way that it's just really, really difficult and confusing for new players. Like, I would say probably 9 in 10 people that ask me questions about, like, one of the combat videos I made would be like, why are you using Slice instead of Punish when Slice does, this range of damage, but Punish always does this much, so that's better. Because the ability tooltips don't even say the correct information. Like, they don't give the full damage range for certain abilities, so a new person won't even know what's stronger than other things. It's really just terrible.
That is unforgivable in my eyes.
Yeah.
Like, the tooltips have to, like, that's something which, that's on Jagex. That is something which they need to address if that's still the case. I don't know if it is still. I do remember some issues.
Yeah, Slice is 30 to 120, but then Punish just says deals up to 94%.
Right, okay. So it's not
And
consistent.
To everyone's brain, you just think, oh, 94% is better than the average between 30 and 120.
I remember my friend explaining it to me, and I was like, why would I even use slice?
Right.
Because, you know, I don't want to hit that 30% over a consistent 90. And they're like, oh no, but it works. And it's like, well, why did Jagex do this? Like, I don't understand. My brain, it hurts.
Right. Or just list the fact that Punish also has a minimum damage of like 18%. Like, that's much lower. Everything about Punish is worse. And it should say so.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is they recently released the lesser abilities, which I think is an incredible idea, and they should have done that so long ago. But do you think those lesser abilities are going to be enough? Are they going to get explained? Like, people need to know what those abilities still do, right? And I don't think they're going to be explained that well. I think they're just going to have them, and they're going to have Revo on, and they can, like, click things and kill them. But what if they want to change their bar once they hit, 30 magic or something? They're going to be confused at that point, right?
So I don't know what you're talking about with lesser abilities. That's probably a new thing. What's that? Give me like a TLDR.
You know how when you leveled up, you would get like certain abilities at level 5, 10, 15, 20, and you'd have to suffer with rack at level 1. Now you get lesser Dragon Breath, lesser Concentrated Blast, stuff like that. So you have the lesser abilities that are scaling with your level until you unlock them, essentially.
Okay, yeah, that's brilliant. Because before, you couldn't even put together full rotations as a new player, which is insane. That's a great thing.
Yeah, and that's something that's came out of ModPie working on mobile. So even though ModPie isn't making this Hostilius boss, he has helped in that regards. But is that, is something like this enough to warrant his time being used on it as such a good developer of the game?
Yeah, ModPie's a hero.
They rely on him so much. It's quite worrying that if he goes missing,
I agree.
Like, they should pay him whatever he wants, because like teaching someone what he knows over these years, I don't know if it's possible. So yeah, it's just kind of shame that they rely on him, but at the same time, like, they need to treat him well.
I remember speaking to him at Jagex, and he's like one of the nicest people you're going to meet as well, and he's very passionate nice. And yeah, it's so nice to just have him talk to you, because the stuff that he knows and the things that he says is just fantastic. But like I said, do you think those lesser abilities and stuff is enough for a new player? You know, in the combat system as you do, and I'm a new player. I've got these lesser abilities. They've given them to me. They've given me the action bar order and stuff. But I've leveled up a bit. I have a couple of new abilities that aren't on my bar, and I want to know where to put them. It's still going to be really confusing, right?
Yeah, I think there needs to be really, really significant change to combat to make it accessible to new players. Like, as kind of to zoom out and look at it in a grander scheme, the kind of core issue with combat is that the skill floor, the entry level, like how much you need to know to be at all decent at it, is really high. You need to know a surprising amount. But the skill ceiling is really low. Like, once you know the basic stuff, another 2 or 3 hours of learning a few things and practicing, and you can 4-tick and you're as good as most people. So examples of noob trap stuff: Fury and Concentrated Blast. I can't tell you how many times I've had people use a bar from my my videos, and they're like, I don't know why, but it takes me 45 minutes to build up to 100% adrenaline. And I'm like, oh, okay, something's wrong then. Talk to me about what you're doing. They're like, well, I just use Revo and I set it up the way that you have it. But because Concentrated Blast and Fury, the entry-level versions of Fury, channel for the 3 hits if you don't interrupt it, how does a new player learn that that's not the right way to use the ability? That shouldn't even exist as a possibility.
I agree.
And they tried to address it in the past with the Concentrated Blast and Fury buff and completely failed. So then they kind of addressed it in a new way by making Greater Fury just a single global cooldown ability, but then you're locking it behind kind of a high-level item, so it's still a noob trap. If a new
and it's very expensive as well for those greater abilities,
right? So if a new player comes in and they're like, oh, I heard Fury's good, and put Fury in the first spot, they're gonna be insanely bad. If you fully channel Fury and do everything else correctly, you lose like half your DPS instantly.
Yeah. So like a question I have for you, June, is like when a new player comes in, because both you and Maikeru have like trained a lot of noobs, and like I know this because I know both of you've like done loads and loads of raids and taken new people to bosses and stuff like that, and so you guys probably know this much more than I do. So like, do you think that the onus is on the player? Like, say for example you've logged into RuneScape, you've never logged in before, and you see these bunch of abilities. Do you think like the player should be required to go on like an external site like YouTube or the wiki to find out the best way to do things, or do you think like the knowledge should just be there? Like in the game, like this is how the best way to do things in some sort of tutorial, like this is the rotation that you should use? Or do you think like oh, as a newbie I should be going on YouTube and figuring it out for myself?
I would really, really love if they had something where it was like a guide or just a little bit of like a notebook. If someone wants to learn more about PVM and they had a notebook that kind of just gave examples of, you know, this is the type of stuff you want to use. These are the type of stuff that are decent, and just a couple of breakdowns of like what abilities you should unlock and things like that. Because the amount of times I took people to go to Yaka when I used to teach that on my Discord, we used to take 2 learners or so, and we'd have our team, and it'd be fine even if they died, whatever, you know. But they would use Deadshot, stuff like that on Yaka, and there'd be no death swiftnesses, or they'd camp 100% Adren because they don't have any more thresholds up, but they don't use any ultimates. There's so much that I feel like someone who wants to get into PVM has to learn, that then they become a bit overwhelmed. But then once you've learned it, it's easy. Like Junesong said, like the entry level is really high, but once you've found that and you've got all of it mastered, it then just becomes like second nature. But I wouldn't have known any of the abilities being as good as they are if I wasn't told and explained. So if they had like a rule book or something where they're like, this is an example that I would use at this boss. And the J mods, right? They know how to PVM, right? They
I don't
made
know,
the
dude.
system.
That's something which I'm
A couple do.
like, because like I think like they release a new like ability and they're like, okay, maybe it's not too powered, but I don't think that they go in like, oh, this ability will be in this part of this rotation. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think like they designed the combat triangle to be like, this is the best version of the rotation you should have.
Yeah, they might not know the best, but if they gave the basics, because I know there's plenty of people. There's Mod Pi, there's Mod Shogun plays a lot, then there's Shawnee, Mod Ramen. There's so many different mods that know the game. They can do every boss. They know rotations. They know mock-ups. It might not be the most optimized thing. I'm not saying they need to make it so it has to be exactly 100% most efficient. Just an example of something that they would do, or an example of something they would take, or a rotation they would use at specific bosses. So if you went to a boss, maybe they could be like a little eye, and you click the little eye, and it'd be like, this is information on this boss. These are the type of rotations we recommend you using. This is the type of gear setup we recommend you using. Good luck.
Gotcha.
That would help so much, even if it's only that little tiny bit of information where they look at, you know, going into Yaka, like I had with the dead shots, but they click that little eye and they're like, use Death Swiftness or Sunshine or something, and they might think, oh, I can replace that on my action bar, and then they've instantly got way better DPS, and they've instantly got a bit more of a grip of this is what you should do.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, like, say for example, like when I was learning PVM, if there wasn't a Junesong guide out there telling me this is the best rotation to do it, like, how am I meant to learn that? Because the wiki was wrong.
Yeah.
The game information was wrong. Like, how are people meant to like learn that intuitively without like searching in an encyclopedia for it? It's very difficult, and that needs to change.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem. Like, it ties to the high skill floor, low skill ceiling thing. That should be exactly the reverse. We should have a really low skill floor and a really high skill ceiling, so that if you took a 12-year-old and plopped them in front of a computer for the first time and say, here, like, figure out how to do combat, in 15 minutes they should be able to figure out, like, rudimentary rotations and do kind of okay. The same way that if I go out and buy some random console game that I've never played and don't read any guides or watch any videos and just sit down and try and figure it out, I'm going to be all right in 15 minutes. But then over the course of like weeks and months of playtime, I'm going to become a master of the combat system. We should be aiming for that same thing in RuneScape. So there will still be a place for YouTube videos or text guides on like really mastering ability rotations, but a brand new player or a soccer mom or whatever who doesn't have the time to go through and like really fine-tune master all that stuff should be able to just kind of figure it out for themselves well enough to function.
Yeah, I like that very much so. And it's hard for Jagex to do that without, because like all the JMods have played this game, right? It's hard to imagine yourself as a new player. So like if it was me,
Yeah.
I would just hire people who haven't played RuneScape and just sit with them for like a couple of weeks and figure out everything that they found difficult and what they would like to change. Because like it's so hard for us to even like go back and look at it that way, because it's impossible because we know the game, right? So
They did that as part of mobile. So one of the new people they've employed is all about new player enjoyment and engagement. What they used to go by is, hey, this person done Tutorial Island and 10 minutes later they quit. They have that information, logs, but they never got any reasons for it and things like that. Now there's a new guy who's in charge who gets a certain amount of people, they get them play testing it, they get their experiences, ask if they're going to play again. If they say no, they figure out why they won't. And that's partly where I believe some of the interface changes, especially for mobile, and some of the like lesser abilities and some of the early gameplay has been changed to more suit newer players, and so they can understand it a bit more. I think it needs way more, of course, but they're starting to go in the right direction, I believe. And if they continue that way, I feel like it's going to be a better experience. But how long is it going to take them? You know, that's the issue.
yeah, it's interesting. So I think we've covered combat pretty well. June, another thing which you did on your YouTube, which I personally really enjoyed watching, was your RuneScape Psychology series. Something
Yeah.
something quite unique and something I've been like kind of tempted to do as well, but I approach it from a different view than you did. But some of like the more appealing ones that you did, which kind of got attention from others, was your views on elitism and how newer players are treated, etc., etc. So, have your views changed? Are they pretty much the same as they were back when you were making those videos?
They're mostly the same. You have to remember those videos are mostly kind of tongue-in-cheek and not to be taken like super serious clinical stuff. My day job, I am a psychologist, so it was just kind of a fun thing to do. So not 100% of people who act like elitists are doing it because of the Dunning-Kruger effect, for example. That's just a common thing. And I think people relate to it and really enjoy that video because when somebody who's really better than you acts like they're better than you, everyone goes, oh yeah, whatever. But when somebody who's just like a potato-brained moron is like, oh dude, you're the worst, I can't believe you don't use rack every second ability, everyone face palms and is like, what the heck is, like, what is wrong with this person? And so they get kind of a little laugh out of it. I will say, by all means, like, continue the series. I would love to see more of them done. The only reason I kind of stopped doing them was because I had like 5 or 6 more ideas, but the psychology behind them was too complicated that it just ended up sounding more like a psychology lecture than kind of a fun video. So I would love to see your take on them for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's something which really captured my imagination, because as much as, you know, like people like Maikeru are super consistent with their videos and like they upload every 2 or 3 days and like they've done it for years, sometimes it's definitely hard to be quite original, and I thought that was very, very good because it just shows like, you know, there's so many ways you can like perceive this game, and that's like one of the reasons why I love it as well. So
that being said, from you as a content creator, what were your favorite videos to make? An enjoyment factor for you personally? Was it, you know, breaking down all the DPS stuff? Was it psychology stuff? Was it just doing completionist stuff? Like, what type of stuff did you enjoy the most?
In terms of making things, it would definitely be the DPS guides, because I get the most reward out of it from helping people. Like, it's the same reason I got into doing psychology for work, and I'm actually changing fields. I'm going to work in health and fitness. Again, the goal is ultimately to help people. That's kind of the common thread between everything that I find interesting. But they all, I enjoyed all of them in different ways. Like the collecting collections things, there was almost no real content there. They were just kind of like random memes and my life sucking, having to kill like 7,000 Linza and just like, meme videos that didn't help anybody, but they were fun, that nothing I ever released, I was like, I wish I hadn't done that. They all held their own thing for me, but definitely above all was the DPS guides.
Yeah, okay. I thought that would probably be the reason, because I know that you're very similar to me and you like helping people, and that's why you probably got into content creation and stuff as well. And even though you can't like always help people with those type of videos, I do like Iron Man progression videos, and I'm doing like an Iron Man PVM series and stuff at the moment.
Yeah.
But I love doing that, because even if it just means that I've like memed around, or there's like one little meme in there that will make someone smile, or something that will make someone laugh, then that can help them in another way that isn't like teaching.
You're entertaining them.
But you're letting them escape, and they're escaping into your content, and they're having a good time, and that's a big thing about YouTube, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. One thing, another thing which I wanted to ask you on is, especially as someone who has played a lot of RuneScape, according to your own admission, and I think me and Maikeru are in the exact same boat. We've all played a lot of RuneScape. Do you think, like, at any point it became unhealthy? And do you think, like, there is too much? Like, I think there's a point where, this is too much. And, like, you're going away from the game. And, there must be reasons behind that as well. You found some rewarding things in real life, etc. Like, do you think, when should we be worried that we're playing too much?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My journey through RuneScape and mental health is almost the opposite of most people. I actually kind of started off in the unhealthy place and ended in the healthy place. So what really drew me to RuneScape originally was I picked it up when I was like 12 years old is when I started. So this is a very, very long time ago. But when I was a child, my family moved constantly. My dad was a construction worker, and one of the things he did in addition to working his construction job was we would buy a house that needed repairs, and over the course of 3 to 6 months he would do a bunch of repairs, and then we would sell the house for more money, buy a new house that needed repairs, rinse and repeat. But this brought us, like, we were in Maine, we were in Florida. For people outside the United States, that's something like 2,000 kilometers away, and I was bouncing around school districts and basically was unable to maintain any kind of friendships just because I was constantly moving from place to place. So RuneScape became the way to have a remotely healthy social life long distance, because at the time, like, we didn't have texting or really anything like that. This is kind of it. And that's what really drew me to it at first. And the risk with that is that when an online game is your primary source of social interaction, you develop almost a social anxiety-induced addiction to it. Which I found that I had, at least for the first few years, and over time had to like progressively push myself toward like, okay, I'm an adult now, I live in my own house, I'm not going to move constantly, I need to find and make some friends here and do some real stuff with real people. And that had a much healthier impact on my time on RuneScape. And even though, like, because of my job, as I mentioned, I was playing like 40 hours a week at work, and then maybe, 30 or 40 more hours at home, 80 hours of RuneScape a week sounds like a ton, but in that particular context, it was a healthy way. Whereas for another person, playing 10 hours a week might not be healthy. It really all depends on how it impacts your life. And I think one of the psychology videos was kind of about that, was about gaming addiction. And really the key to deciding, is this a problem for me, is how this impacts your life. Like, have you ever called out of work because you had to make a certain promo thing, like, one of the winter weekends double boss drops, and you're like, all right, I'm calling out. Or, canceling plans with family and friends because you need to get 99 woodcutting tonight. Things like that are red flags, like, maybe my relationship with gaming is not in a healthy spot right now.
Gotcha. And you're not planning on coming back, are you? Like, Or, well, you play casually now?
Probably not.
And does that mean no more YouTube videos as well?
Okay, so this one will be a little long. I just because of the amount of time that I've spent on RuneScape and how prominent of a role it played in my life, I'm probably always going to keep checking back in and see what's new. You know, I mean, the meme is that nobody ever quits RuneScape, but for me, it's probably true. I'm not going to play consistently, but every year or two, I'll probably check back and be like, oh, I wonder what's going on, and see how it's going. Because if a year from now the game is like totally different and half the complaints I have been rectified in some way, I might be like, oh, I may start playing casually again. But for now, I don't really have any plans to. As far as videos, there definitely aren't going to be RuneScape videos unless, like I said, in the future I decide that I'm going to start playing casually again. But on the tail end of my transition to a career in health and fitness, my wife and I are looking at probably making like instructional guides for like losing weight, full-length workouts that you can do with us and stuff. So it'll be a tricky thing because that's a super oversaturated market, but it'll mostly be for fun anyway, not expecting to be successful or make any money with it, just like I wasn't planning to with RuneScape videos. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. So certainly whenever we get around to doing that, which should be in the near future, I will probably post kind of like a video directing over to that channel to the RuneScape channel, maybe make some kind of like meme video of like a RuneScape themed workout to make it relevant or something.
Brilliant.
But I'm looking forward to that.
That's cool, because I like the fact that obviously you got kind of burnt out with the game and the comments and the community and the aspects of that, and then you had your own life stuff that you had to do.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see that you still have that spark for some type of content creation and that helpfulness about you, where you want to make guides to help people.
Yeah.
And that makes me happy, because there's so many people out there nowadays that they don't really think about helping the people in guides and stuff, and they just, they think about, hey, what's the easiest way to maybe make money, or what's the thing this month, or what clickbait title can I do, etc.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear from fellow content creators, and there's been plenty of them on the podcast and everything. And it's nice and refreshing to hear that people are still doing content creation like I am, to try and help people as much, or entertain people, or just do it because they want to do it. Like, I don't force myself to make any videos that I don't want to do anymore. I'd done it at the start. I was a sucker for that. I made guides that I didn't enjoy making just because I knew they'd attract people.
Yeah.
But now I always make guides that I know will either help people, or videos that I personally feel strong about, or stuff that I want to showcase, etc. So that's exactly what you are continuing to do, and that's really cool. I'll definitely check out whenever you make your fitness stuff as well. Sure. That's pretty cool.
Me too. Like, I think that's something that most of us share in common, especially us three. Well, I know when Maikeru started, it wasn't meant to be a career for Maikeru, right? He did it for fun.
Yeah.
And June did it, and Maikeru did it to help people. June did it the same way. I also did it like with the same kind of motivation, and I quite like that, because it's the kind of motivation is very intrinsic as opposed to extrinsic, and like if you start following the extrinsic motivation, that's when it all goes to shit. That's when you start doing dodgy things, and that's when you start like copying ideas and stuff, which, I think me and June have spoken about that before. Which it's like, it's just really leaves a really bad taste in people's mouths. So definitely looking forward to those new fitness videos.
Right, so we've been talking for over an hour, I think, now, which means we'll probably have to start wrapping up soon. I love these podcasts so much, because it's again a video that I love doing, because speaking and just talking my mind with fellow content creators, fellow like-minded people, and just having that out there for people to listen to, even if it's like part by part or on their journey to work or something, is really nice that they can just sit down, they can listen to us, they can relate, and they can feel like they're here. And that's why I love these anyway. But I'm going off tangent.
Also, just one more thing. Like, I know me and Maikeru have spoken about this. Is like, one thing that we both really appreciate is that everyone has their own journeys. And like, I love learning about how people got into things and stuff like that. And this like kind of podcast allows us to do that. So It was like a
Yeah.
lot of fun learning about your journey as well, dude. Any like final messages which you want to give to the community?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to add at the end. There we go. My final message from Mr. Junesong.
Geez, not really. I would just say thanks for having me on. This was super fun. If you guys would like to do it again, I'm pretty much always free on weekends. If you guys want to check out my YouTube channel, it's YouTube/the Junesong RS, Twitter at the Junesong RS. If you're interested in looking into the health and fitness stuff, follow either one of those. I'm sure when it comes about, it will be heavily advertised in both places. And even though I'm not playing a lot, you can still catch me online most weeknights, and I'm happy to just chat. That's really the only reason I get online, is just to kill some time talking to people. So feel free to ask questions. I still know a fair amount about combat and can help out, or just, shoot the shit. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Junesong's channel will be in the description as always as well. So if you guys want to check him out, he has, like I said, I still recommend people to his DPS guides because they're still relevant, still insane.
They're so good for new players,
Yeah,
like to pick up.
exactly, yeah.
That's the beauty of them. Like, if you're just a new player, you can watch the video and you'll understand because he breaks it down in a way that noobs like me can understand. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah. One of my favorite ego buffs of all time was ModPie telling me that they use my videos to teach new J mods how to do combat stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's amazing.
oh, that's lovely, dude.
I jizzed in my pants a little.
But thank you so much for coming on, my man. I appreciate that. It's been very fun. And hopefully everyone's enjoyed listening.
Yeah, thank you.
William, if you're listening, I really hope the chlamydia clears up, dude. Much love.
No. Okay, Will is ill. He doesn't have chlamydia. It won't stop him speaking, okay? Don't listen to this Ravlar guy. Will he's fine. He's just recovering. And this was a combat one, so I think because he was recovering and sleeping, it didn't matter as much to him because he is a skiller. But yeah, Will be back for the next podcast, and that's the end of this one. So thank you everyone for coming on, and I appreciate you all.
Yeah, thanks.